Padatri was supposed
Padatri was supposed to come, but then due to some family issues, he could not come.
So we have limited time. So what I request, and I hope
so this is a
understand.
particular So this is a particular project that we are doing on elephant corridors in Jharkhand, and this is funded by the Tribal Research Initiative in our state. And Padatri was our research intern, and I am Dr. Prakash, the principal investigator, and Saurya Das is the co-investigator. So I'll be sharing some of the findings. This is a research still ongoing. So this is midway kind of sharing paper we can think of it. So what is the rationale of this? So Jharkhand is home to 17 identified elephant corridors in India. It serves as a vital ecological node for elephant conservation in central India. The crisis of fragmentation is there because of, as you understand, on the land of Bihar, I can say that in the year 2000, Jharkhand got separated because of primarily two issues. One is that marginalization of many people were there, and they were concerned, and their needs were not being properly taken care of by the Bihar government, and then we should be coming out as a separate state. So, but then at the nascent stage, the level of development was not very good. So Jharkhand has two different approaches or two different opportunities to follow. So one is that you go with the current path of development whereby you promote mining, you promote industrialization, because we are sitting on the heap of so many kind of minerals and other kind of natural resources. So initially they tried to do something, try to do a justifiable kind of natural resource management, but then ultimately it was a half-hearted kind of approach. So ultimately what is taking over is the neoliberal land use policies. So now the industries are being promoted, and that is why for infrastructure and for mining, for other things. So that has fragmented the kind of natural habitats that elephants have. So that is why there is a big challenge, and it has resulted in the human elephant conflict with fatal outcomes for both humans and elephants. Social inequality and ecological exploration. Marginalized forest communities are disproportionately affected by human-elephant conflict. These are some of the findings. Then these groups face crop loss, displacement, economic hardship, often without adequate support. And I just like to tell that even though the number of elephants in Jharkhand as a state share in India is not very high, but it has got the highest share of human animal conflict in the state. So that is why it requires a lot of attention. Over 474 human and 30 elephant deaths have occurred over the 5-year period from 2019 to 2024. Corridors have drastically. Corridor is the path of movement for the elephants. So they live in patches in the forest, and during different seasons they follow a particular path. And it is very important for us to know that elephants are having very strong memory, strong memory. So this is kind of generational memory that they have. So they kind of try to follow the same path all over again. So these are very wide area basically. So when I say elephant corridor, it is not a small path. It is usually say 20-25 kilometers wide. But in many of the places, so I can say that 3/4 of that has come to less than 1 kilometer wide. So it is a very, very serious challenge. So if that is what happens, their path of movement is disturbed, where will they go? They will go to the nearby villages. And when they go to the nearby villages, they become depredators. So they will be eating away the crops, they will be eating the stored crops, standing crops, everything. And then there will be conflict that will be occurring, resulting in different kind of casualty, both for the elephant as well as for the human beings. Then inequitable impact on marginalized communities, usually who stay in say some kind of makeshift kind of arrangement, thatched houses. So these are very vulnerable. Women's forest-based roles are also disrupted, because many of them, they go to the forest to collect NTFP, non-timber forest produce. Need for a political ecology lens is also required, because governance models often ignore power dynamics, making disposition as neutral. The crisis reflects accumulation by disposition. So looking at the paucity of time, I'm just sharing some of the other. So our objectives for this particular study was threefold. One is to develop a conceptual framework for integrating ecological, economic, as well as political perspective to understand human and elephant conflict in Jharkhand. assess the ecosystem services provided by elephant corridors, and examine human-elephant conflict patterns alongside underlying social, economic, and political factors. This is what I would like to just give a little emphasis on this, because many a times if I see the corridors as just being utilized for the movement of the elephants, then that is a gross injustice. These path of movement are basically forest, and these are integral part. As an integral part, they also come up with so many kind of ecosystem services that they provide to the human beings and who are living in the area as well as in the vicinity of the area. So it is not for the elephant alone these should be preserved or conserved. It is for the overall development of the and the well-being of the human being who are residing in the area, for the maintenance of the biodiversity. So there is a help, there is a lot of list of opportunities or the benefits that flow out of maintenance or conservation of the elephant corridors. Then propose an inclusive governance for sustainable conflict mitigation through participatory solutions rooted in community-based conservation. Our methodology, going through literature review, then expert interviews, we have conducted so many of these. Then semi-structured interviews, we visited. These are the highly affected area, West Singhbhum and part of Ranchi districts. So these are the villages that we visited, and we interacted with the people, with the forest officials, with the local self-government officials, the village leaders, the tribal leaders, and other committees that they do have in the villages. Yes. Then, what is the conceptual framework that we have used? We have used the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Framework 2025 and TEAM Concept 2010 and the Political Ecological Concept. I will come into that very shortly, and expert interview and field verification. So this is the concept that we have come up with, whereby this is the ecosystem services. So these are 4 ecosystem services that flow out of many of the natural system in place. Provisioning services, they provide us food, water resources basically for our needs, that comes out of that. Then they also serve regulatory services, reduce human elephant conflict, the maintenance of the natural resources that leads to all these kind of things, soil and water quality maintenance, pest and disease control. Then supporting services, they also support biodiversity, habitat connectivity, nutrient cycling, and cultural services. So many kind of our cultural needs are also fulfilled by some of the natural resources that we do have. Then the second one is biodiversity and ecosystem. So I'm not going into the so I'll just look at I would like to draw your attention to the red lines. These are all the negative impacts, and the green lines, these are the positive impacts. So if I do have for example the institution of governance, and for this particular seminar let's focus on the governance part. So the institutions which are in place and the governance role that they undertake, if that is not properly done, then it tends to affect the deep-rooted drivers. So for example, the government suppose being insensitive to the needs of the people, suppose promotes kind of blindly the path of neoliberal policies, then it affects these natural resources, and that in terms lead to the collapsing of the biodiversity and the ecosystem, and that has again the negative impact on the ecosystem services that it flows. Then that is again going to affect the ecological well-being, and again the sustainable local well-being. So it is not only affecting the elephants and the biodiversity of the region, but also the human well-being. So at the end of it, if I don't do my work at the beginning correctly, then ultimately it is biting me, at my back. So that is the kind of thing that we have to come out of. So how to come out of that is by this kind of management and restoration. So policy reform has to be there, then conservation initiative, then community-based natural resource management. So given more time, I would have like to focus on that, but then I'll just go on to bring your attention to some of the ecosystem services that comes out of this maintenance of elephant corridors. One is it functions as a whole ecosystem, as I have already told you. The second one is elephant acts as keystone species dispersing seeds. Some of the particular seeds, that particular species, they are dispersed by the elephant dung basically. So unless and it passes through that, it doesn't germinate. So these are the kind of, so it is a keystone species. Without that, some of the species we are going to lose. And then elephant dung acts as a natural fertilizer, enriching the soil nearby in the nearby areas. Then okay, so these are some of these. Then these are the impacts of different kind of incidents that have been reported. I just skipping this. This is very important anyway. So where do we stand? What is the intended outcome and what is the actual outcome out of these different kind of policies? Many of the places we are not achieving the targets because we are not taking a holistic approach of maintaining this, and many of the governance failures which are coming up. These are the kind of so what does the government do when there is some kind of human element conflict that occurs? So they have come up with this kind of compensation policies. If there is a death, then they compensate with 4 lakhs rupees, and these are the kind of compensation that it occurs. However, I would like to bring your attention, that these compensation are just rules. These are all the provisions. But then, out of our interactions in the villages, I can say that less than 20% of the cases are actually reported.
No, but the theme of the paper, if we combine with this, the compensation is not going to solve the
Not going to solve. Not going to solve. And even up to that, sir, compensation not being given because of the under-reportage that is happening. Because of certain insistence that it requires is you have to provide the photo in hard copy.
So I have a small curiosity. So is there any evidence where this corridor, width of the corridor has increased anywhere in this country? So any intervention or something? The one way is to give a space to the elephants.
In Karnataka they have done this, but then that is also not in a very large area. So ETRI, the organization, they acquired a patch of land which is just 25 kilometers of length, and then they have made a lot of conservation effort. In Chaibasa also, Chaibasa district also, they did some kind of intervention whereby they promoted elephant loving species like bamboo, plantation and all. And then some of the species that they promoted whereby they encourage the farmers to cultivate say this ginger and chili, which are big detractors for the elephant, so they don't intrude into this.
That is detractor, but it is not giving a space to them.
So it detracts, that means and whenever elephants are there, standing in their area, people tend to not go there to that reason. So that is how it is conserved.
So can we? So let us stop here so we can discuss. It's very interesting.
Sure. So these are some examples.
So if we have a quick question or something, or we can discuss over lunch.
Yeah, sure.
So we can go to the next and last presentation that we have, which is online. Correct?
I'd like to thank the CIMP as well as the ICPPM committee for giving me this virtual platform for my presentation. So I am Nirupam, I am from Dehradun. So today I think most of the studies are micro-specific, but I like to focus on a macro issue. So my topic is effect of environmental degradation on healthcare expenditure. So on a study on selected economics. So in the last decade or so, the environmental degradation is one of the primary issue, and it is affecting almost all aspects of our life. And it is also day by day basis. It is affecting different health parameters. And recently, one of the studies by UNDP has shown the death because of the pollution and environmental degradations are also rising. And because of this pollution and environmental burden, the health expenditure of the individuals are also increasing. So apart from that, I will skip the basic intro. So what we have tried to do is there are studies which are actually showing that environmental degradation affects health qualities. But what we did, we have tried to see how it affects the expenditure level. Here we have decomposed the health expenditure into 4 different parts. One is current health expenditure, another one is domestic government health expenditure, another is domestic private health expenditure, another one is out-of-pocket expenditure. So mostly the existing studies focus on how this pollution affects mental health or respiratory health or mortality and other health level issues. So, but the literature on how it impacts the expenditure are very sparse. So we have tried to address this gap. for this purpose, we have conducted our study for over the last 2 decades, or more than like 2 decades, for 23 years, and we have selected both developed and emerging economies in our study, and we have followed the Morgan Stanley Capital Index's country specification list. From that, we have declassified the countries into developed and emerging ones. So this is our overall variable description. Like our main dependent variable are different dimensions of health expenditure, and our independent variable is environmental degradation, that is the CO2 emission. Yes, we have used carbon dioxide emission as a proxy to measure the environmental degradation, and this is our control variables. So here are the four overall models that we have used. First one is how environmental degradation impacts the current health expenditure. The second one is how it impacts the domestic government health expenditure. Third one is how it impacts the private health expenditure. And fourth one is the out of pocket. We have mainly used fixed effect estimation to deduce our results. So what we have, another thing also did, we have constructed a multidimensional health expenditure index that is combining all these four different parameters of health expenditure. We have constructed another index, it is the overall health expenditure, and we have also seen whether how this environmental degradation impact the overall health expenditure. This is the simple pattern or trend of different parameters of health expenditure. Mostly we found for all the economies, the health expenditure is rising, but for the emerging ones, we have found the out-of-pocket expenditure as well as the private health expenditure is raising day by day. And these are our main estimation results. Here I have only mentioned the result for the emerging nations because we have, for the developed nations, we found that in case of developed nations, we found, I have not included the results for the developed nations or the overall. This is mainly the results for the emerging nations. Here we found that in case of out-of-pocket expenditure and the private expenditure, the impact is very high. On the other hand, the government expenditure, the impact is relatively less. So, and this is the effect of how environmental degradation impact the overall health expenditure. This is also found with the increase in environmental degradation, the expenditure, the health expenditure is increasing. So from that, we can conclude that because of this environmental degradation, health expenditure is rising, but mostly that rise is being covered by the out-of-pocket and the private one, but on the other hand, it is supposed to be covered by the government one. So from that analysis, we can conclude that for the emerging nations, the government should try to focus more on developing better healthcare units so that excess expenditure which is being incurred due to increase in environmental degradation should be covered by the government one, not by the private. So with that, I would like to conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Because of the possibility of time, I was rushed through.
Yeah, thank you. If you could show us the estimation slide.
Hello.
Estimation slide, if you could show us the estimation slide that is there.
Estimation slide.
Yeah, so briefly, if you could explain that. So what it says that CO2 emission has a negative impact on health expenditure. So if you could explain the relation that increasing CO2. So what does it say that?
In our case, the CO2 is a negative variable. So if it is going.
So what is that negative variable? So explain that. So what is this CO2? So when we write CO2, it says that to something CO2 has a negative impact on that. So it is not the case exactly.
So the thing is like here we have CO2 emission we have used as a proxy for environmental degradation, and since it's have a negative connotations, increase in environmental degradation means it's more harmful. So when it is a negative impact means increase in environmental degradation as the environmental degradation is increasing, the expenditure is also increasing.
So that is the point. When we say that there is an increase, there is a variable which is supposed to be a negative variable. And if we name it as a positive variable, so its impact, like say CO2 in itself is a negative. When we say that increase in CO2 emissions, what does it say? It says that environmental degradation. But what it is happening here, you are taking CO2 as a variable, which says that improvement in some environment or something, and that will have negative impact on. So you may consider, I mean, you may consider, think of renaming these variables so that the message which is conveyed is
that's
that
why we have the point is
something
like that
like that.
actually,
So,
since
yeah.
all we have CO2.
If there is any other questions,
Hello.
Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting study. I just wanted to know, this greenhouse gas emission has a negative impact on health. But apart from greenhouse gases, it is the pollution which is the main contributor to the problem in the health care. So how are you able to isolate the impact of pollution and the impact of greenhouse gas emission increase on the health? Have you done this kind of thing, or you have simply assumed that greenhouse gas takes care of the pollution part also?
No, I have not assumed that because environmental regulation is a very broad umbrella term and there are multiple ways of capturing the environmental regulation. CO2 is one of the proxies by which we can, that is, we have assumed the CO2 emission or conventional studies have also found the CO2 emission is one of the proxy variables by which we can actually pinpoint the environmental degradation, and so we have used the CO2 emission as one of the proxy variable to measure the environmental degradation. But we have actually, to test the robustness of our study, we have also used the greenhouse gas emission and the other variables like the natural calamity and other environmental degradation variables, that how those are impacting the healthcare expenditure, and the results are almost similar. Hello. Hello.
Can you go to the previous slide?
Which one?
Slide number 10. Yeah, just previous one. Yeah, here there are 4 of the expenses that you are showing. Well, it's not very clear. But then, but what we can see is in model 3 and model 4, which is your private expenditure and out-of-pocket expenditure. The previous one, please. Previous slide. Yeah. So it is coming down. What does that indicate?
sudden drop.
What are these lines indicating?
So this so see, the right panel are for the right panel. The top panel is for the developed economies,
Okay.
and the below panel is for the emerging nations. So you can see that in case of developed nations, the out of pocket, in case of so this is for all the countries. So out of pocket expenditure is coming down, that you can see this signifies that though the health expenditure is increasing, but that is mostly being covered by the private one, not the out of pocket. So this is like we can say that this is increase over the years. Like this is not a individual trend analysis. This trend.
So why is there a sudden drop at the bottom right extreme?
All the graphs.
All the graphs.
So that we can say that can be see if we can collaborate with the government health expenditure, then we can see there is a steep increase in the government health expenditure with at the same time when the out of pocket has come down. So this is from that we have formulated the hypothesis. The drop has happened.
So what you are saying is not matching with what we are seeing.
So that is our hypothesis, and that was our hypothesis.
Just a moment. So what is happening, and what he is saying is that in all the graphs in the bottom panel, left and right, what is happening for the last year, it is touching 0. So what it means is that out of pocket expenditure as a percentage of GDP has become nil, which is, I guess, is not the case. So you may like to revisit your data. So 2 observations, and one is that revisit your data, and other is that revisit your estimation and its interpretation, how CO2 emission is being interpreted with the final outcome. So with that, I would like to thank you. So, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
That is fine, but what is happening in the graph is that it is in all the places it is 0. So
then I will revisit this part.
Private health expenditure as a percentage of GDP is 0.
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe you can run some logistic model. See,
ठीक है.
Okay.
So with this we come to